Hey y'all, and welcome to the Summit podcast where we today are going to be going over the parable of the prodigal son. I'm joined here today by my friend Hailey.
Hello.
Hailey is the intern here at the BCM, and okay, guys, so today we are going to be reading obviously the parable of the prodigal son, and it's in Luke chapter 15. So the parable of the prodigal son is in verses 11 through 32. We're going to read part of the parable of the prodigal son. We're going to talk about it, and then we're going to go over the next part of the parable of the prodigal son. Okay. And I am going to ask Hailey to pray us in. Okay. Okay. Awesome. Okay.
Dear Lord, thank you for letting us gather here today and just dive into your word. And thank you for the fellowship that we have with each other. Just that we're able to have other people to bounce ideas off of and interpret your word and grow closer to you. I pray that you bless this time that we have together and bless this podcast as we go into it. And thank you again. Amen.
Amen. Okay. So I'm going to be reading verses 11 through 24 first. Okay. And he said, there was a man who had 2 sons, and the younger of them said to the father, Father, give me the share of property that is coming to me. And he divided his property between them. Not many days later, the younger son gathered all he had and took a journey into a far country. And there he squandered his property in reckless living. And when he had spent everything, a severe famine arose in that country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of the country, who sent him into the fields to feed the pigs. And he was longing to be fed with the pods that the pigs ate, and no one gave him anything. But when he came to himself, he said, How many of my father's hired servants have more than enough bread, but I perish here with hunger? I will arise and go to my father, and I will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me as one of your hired servants. And he arose and came to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and felt compassion, and ran and embraced him and kissed him. And the son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his servants, Bring quickly the best robe and put it on him. Put the ring on his hand and the shoes on his feet. And bring the fattened calf and kill it. And let us eat and celebrate. For this my son was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. And they began to celebrate. So what I think initially reading this every time is that, like, it's such a parallel to how God loves us. Because, like, I can imagine my parents, and my parents are awesome, but I feel like they would be more like, hey, like, what the heck did that? Like, they would be like, oh, like, girl, what are you doing? But this really gives a real life example of God's love to where it's very easy for everybody to understand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like if you read it and you think about what an insult it would be to the father to like say, hey, I'd rather you be dead and I want all the stuff you're gonna give me when you die, and then to just completely like destroy even that, like, is such an insult. And I feel like it's so beautiful that he just like embraces him so quickly.
You know, I find it amazing how he was like, put on the best robe and give him a ring and put shoes on his feet, like not even the son being like there yet. He really said, oh, I see him in the distance. We're literally going to give everything to him because my son has returned and he wants to come home. Because the son was fully prepared to just like be a servant. He was prepared to not have a place at the table with his father. And I feel like a lot of times nowadays, especially where we are, a lot of people's faith is kind of fake, where like
Mhm.
they say they're Christian because they kind of have to, or it's cool to
Mhm.
say you're Christian, but then they don't believe. So it's a testament to what the younger son does, because he really said, oh, like, I know that I need this and I'm going to go home and I know I'm not worth it. So I don't think that I'm
Mhm.
going to have a place. But then the dad's like, no, like, you have a place at my table. You are highly regarded. My son is home.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like it's the humility in that too, because I mean, you don't really see that humility at the start because he's like, just give me everything that you're gonna give me when you
Yeah.
die. But like, as they go on, when he's like, no, like, I'll be your servant, like, I'll be with them, then that's a true testament to like how much he grew. Like, I wonder if he was thinking like on that ride back, like
Mm-hmm.
preparing a speech in his head, and like he gets there, and then the father's just like, I don't even want to hear it. Like, you're here. Like, it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't matter.
You know, and I find it, and we'll touch on this in a second, but I find it like astounding how like they killed the fattened calf. Like, all the other stuff, like, yes, him accepting him in was like the pinnacle of like, oh my gosh. And then like him being close and stuff like that, but killing the fattened calf because his son came home and having a party for him, because
Mm-hmm.
like, even though he went and squandered all of the money and did horrible things, his father was still like, I am going to give my best for you, my son who is home.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think also like to think about how the father might have like felt during the
Mm-hmm.
time when the son left. I feel like it's just a very loving, like, he'll come back, like he'll come around, like a
Mm-hmm.
very hopeful. It doesn't seem like he would be somebody to be like crying all the time to
Yeah.
be, and like there's no way to know, but it seems like he's just very hopeful and just loving
Mm-hmm.
in everything he's doing.
Yeah. Okay. And Hailey, would you please read 25 through 32?
Of course. Now his older son was in the field, and as he came and drew near to the house, he heard music and dancing. And he called one of the servants and asked what these things meant. And he said to him, your brother has come, and your father has killed the fattened calf, because he has received him back safe and sound. But he was angry and refused to go in. His father came out and entreated him. But he answered his father, look, these many years I have served you, and I never disobeyed your command. Yet you never gave me a young goat that I might celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours came, who has devoured your property with prostitutes, you killed the fattened calf for him. And he said to him, son, you are always with me, and
You're
all
good.
that is mine is yours. It is fitting to celebrate and be glad, for this your brother was dead and is alive. He was lost and is found.
Yeah, with that second half of this parable, I feel like it's really a testament to like how sometimes we view how non-believers might, like, if a non-believer that like we know has done bad stuff in the past,
Mm-hmm.
or that like we know, like, yeah, like we know might have done bad stuff in the past, how we're like, I feel like people can be judgy, and I feel like
Mm-hmm.
people can like not accept that they actually want to be home or aren't okay with them coming, because it's like, this is my group, like,
Mm-hmm.
you're like filthy, like, get away. But it's like, no, like, y'all, Jesus like literally picked up some fishermen and he said, oh,
Mm-hmm.
you're mine.
Mm-hmm.
He said, and you're mine, and you're going to come with me and help me spread the
Yeah.
gospel.
I feel like it really gets into two things of like the way that we categorize sin, when like I don't know that we necessarily see like the same thing played out when Jesus looks at us, because we're all simple and we all sin like all the time. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that there's a minute that goes by that we're not like thinking something that we shouldn't think, or like something like that. So it's interesting to think about that, and like we'll be like talking about Christians, and oh, he went and he was like with the pigs and like he squandered all your stuff. Like, yes. And
Mm-hmm.
like the father doesn't agree with that, but he's saying like you're brand new.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. I
Yeah.
feel like too like we forget like the second thing being we forget our desperation like for God.
Mm-hmm.
So we're like we have the leg to stand on, like we're the better Christian, but we all in that sin that we all have all the time.
But yeah, no, I can definitely see myself in the older sibling because I unintentionally, I think if there's like one of my friends that like isn't Christian and like
Mm-hmm.
I know that they've done like some things, I'm like, oh, they wouldn't want to hear. They wouldn't want to know about Christ. Like, yeah. And obviously, so I have two younger siblings, and I definitely understand the like, oh, my younger sibling gets all these things, and like, I
Mm-hmm.
don't. Because I feel like it's an older child thing where like a lot of things that your younger siblings get to do, you don't because your parents are like kind of protective of you, which is like understandable. But it's like I don't get all of these things that my younger siblings do. So it's like a comparison and it's like jealousy of the younger sibling and like, why don't I get this stuff if
Mm-hmm.
I've acted this way?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's interesting too. Like, I wonder if the son like he's thinking short term, which I feel like we have the
Mm-hmm.
tendency to do. Of like, I'm not getting out like and going to this party, but like these people get to do this, or like whatever it
Mm-hmm.
is, like in place of that
Mm-hmm.
that like you want to do, but you're like, okay, this doesn't align like biblically. Like this is a testament to like eternally like our reward is a lot greater, like just because the son was like getting these things, I feel like that's like symbolic of like what the older son was to get in heaven. Like, it's like the same prize for both of them if he is to like remain loyal. But the fact that he was like, I'm entitled to this shows like
Mm-hmm.
the lack of humility and like desperation for the
Mm-hmm.
father. So I feel like that's where we have to be careful with things.
Yeah. And recently we had a sermon that talked about entitlement, and we went really in depth with how like everybody is entitled in some way, shape, form, or fashion, and it's how you handle that and how you deal with it and how you fix that that really matters. And I feel that really what the younger son needs is to take like a step back and just like realize like, oh, like instead of him being like, oh, my brother's home, yay, he was like, oh, my brother's home and he's getting everything that I wish I had. And I feel like it's hard to play the comparison game because that's something that I struggle with is like comparison. And it really does affect you and it affects the way you view other people,
Mm-hmm.
especially if it's in a like church setting, because you could be like, oh, these people are getting these positions and I'm not, rather than, oh, this was prayed over and this is
Mm-hmm.
the positions and the reasons why these people should have gotten these like roles
Yeah.
over another person.
Mm-hmm. I think too with that, like I think when I think about myself comparing, I'm like, I don't have an issue with that because it's like thinking about like material things that people have.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you think about like in the context of this, like how often am I like, oh, this person is like so much more kind than me? And then it's like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, wait, that's comparison too. Like I'm
Mm-hmm.
still doing the same thing. So I feel like that's something that I need to be more mindful of. Just like reading this, like,
Yeah.
okay, like God gives us all different spiritual gifts, and that's definitely something we can pray to be more kind, but also like it's worth acknowledging what He gifts us, particularly.
Yeah. Sometimes I am more the younger son because I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm not as cool or I'm not as da 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 da. And then
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, get jealous over things. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, this person. But it's actually just me like loving them and wanting to be like them, but
Mm-hmm.
it's turned into me being like, oh my gosh, like what are they,
Mm-hmm.
like what are they doing?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I think initially, like, there's a lot of things that we do that, like, they're not necessarily simple, but they set the pathway up to sin. So we have to, like, address the root of, like, oh, like, why do I think this about myself? Like, oh, God has given me, like I am really cool, like, type thing, you know
Yeah.
what I mean? And you
Yeah.
are.
Thanks. And thank
Mm-hmm.
you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I feel like, and this is a verse that I always go back to when I start like thinking like that, is that like we are very good. Like we are beautifully and wonderfully made in God's image. Like we are made in the creator of the universe's image. We are made beautifully and wonderfully by him. Like he calls us beautiful and wonderful, and he calls us up to be like him and to be with him. And I find that really important,
Mm-hmm.
that he calls us and just immediately like accepts us to be with him because of what Jesus gave. And I am going to pray us out. Dear Lord, thank you for letting us come here today and have this podcast together. I really appreciate how much that you have done for me and spoken into my life, God. I thank you that I have such role models like Hailey in my life to where I have a group of people surrounding me that will love me and care for me no matter what, and that really just are able to pour into me. And Lord, I just thank you for the community around the two of us. And I thank you so much that you are able to let us know your word. And I thank you that we are able to have your word so readily available because a lot of people don't even have it in their language. So I thank you that we have it to read every day and that your love pours out from it and that we have a guide to help us through our everyday. Lord, please just as we go, let us see your joy and your works throughout this week.